This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
I had the best of all possible raisings, from the bookies to the sharks to the card sharks, pool sharks. I learned more about human nature than any kid could in any school of life. And all the guys were good to the kid and trusted the kid. And they talk around the kid. They wouldn't talk about murder or bank robberies, nothing like that, but the kid heard that stuff.
By the time he was in his early 30s, Billy Sunday Birt had become one of the most powerful and most feared men in Georgia. As the end of the 1960s was approaching, he was a partner in the bootleg business with Ruth and Harold Chansey, and he was the official enforcer and hitman for the newly formed Dixie Mafia. And he operated a pool hall called the Winder Recreation Parlor at 63 Athens Street, which served as a front for his illegal gambling and was a safe haven to plan his contract arson, robbery, and murder jobs. Young Stoney was now along for the ride and had a front row seat to the inner workings of his dad's booming business.
He made $1,015 a week just on the pool hall, running it normally, which was $10,000 to $15,000 a week now, and money-wise. A dime was still silver. And he kept a card game going day and night, which he always won, so he probably won double that on the card games. And it was just kind of like a carnival. It was exciting, and I was privy to that. It's hard to explain. Not that they included me and made it a point to let me hear it, but between overhearing and seeing the next day and the day before, it wasn't a puzzle. If it was a puzzle, it was a 10-piece puzzle.
From Imperative Entertainment, this is In the Red Clay. Though the men tried not to be too blatantly obvious in their conversations, Stoney picked up on a lot, as kids often do when you think they aren't listening. He learned that Billy got the money to buy the pool hall in an unconventional manner back when he worked at the Gainesville Stone and Rock Quarry. A coworker, simply nicknamed Half Moon, had taken him to a VFW hall that doubled as a bustling underground gambling house in a nearby town called Colbert. Billy would rob that gambling house the very next night and walk away with thousands of dollars.
The money was so good that he didn't see the benefit of working anymore. I heard him tell by many people that he made the remark, "I can make more in one night than I can work in 6 months. What kind of fool does that?"
And being that gambling was illegal in the first place, it's not like the people being robbed could really go to the police and report it. So it was easy money, all things considered. And Billy, of course, liked easy money. Except for killing a public official in broad daylight, it seems there really was no job too big or too small that he wouldn't take for the right price.
When I was a kid, Lum's Hot Dogs was my favorite place. And they steamed their hot dogs and beer. And for some reason, they were just that delicious. And all of a sudden, one day wasn't there. He went and got his brother, Bobby Burt. He always said he'd rather have Bob with a sawed-off shotgun than any three of his guys in a tight. But he did not let him go on any murders. He never let Bob go down the dark path. He loved him. He said, "Bob, we got an easy job, son. Pay $500. He said, "Now look, the door's going to be open, the back door. We got to go in there and double check the pipe light." Well, they went through the place and found every pipe light, made sure it was off. But there was this one little room with a small door that Bobby passed. So they went outside and got the gas and kerosene. Now, they use a mixture because when you burn something, you don't use gas unless you want it to blow you to hell. You use kerosene because it's slow start, or diesel. But then to get it going, the last thing you use is gas. So he went through there, and as he was coming out, spreading the gasoline, went into there to get out the door, He seen the room. Opened up, and the son of a gun, he didn't see a blue flame in the hot water area. He closed the door. He said, "Bob, get the hell out of here now." And they both ran out the back door, and he made it just a few feet to a little 3-foot tall block retaining wall, jumped behind it. At that moment, the building blowed off the damn mountain. And cement blocks fell all around them within feet of them. And if one had hit him, it'd have killed him. So he was obliterated. Not by them lighting it, but by that damn pilot. That's how close they come. And he said, $500 good money is 66, but it wasn't worth getting killed for.
Now, at this point, I'm curious, as you might be, about Stoney's early life, his role in all of this. The burning question I have is, well, Stoney's a kid and he's hanging around with his dad and all these other members of the Dixie Mafia every day, overhearing the illegal things his father is clearly involved in. Not to mention, he now always has plenty of cash on hand, and new cars and expensive jewelry on. Stoney must have been wondering, where did all this money come from? Does he not think this is wrong? Or did he wonder, why does Dad leave at 11 o'clock at night and not return until the wee hours of the morning, or sometimes a few days later? Surely, even as a child, he wasn't that naive. Did Stoney just not care about any of this?
When you're an adult, think you're whispering. The kid hears every word like it's a freight train. So by the time of 1968, 69, I probably was know more than any one person living about it all, just from what I'd overheard. But I was conditioned. The thought of repeating it or telling it was just not even in my vocabulary. I was conditioned. If I see my dad bring a safe home and peel it open, I'd go to sleep and go to school the next day. I was conditioned, that was normal. If he toted a man in and put him on the table and took a bullet out of him and toted him out, I'd go on back to bed.
In case you missed that was, if my dad toted a man in and took a bullet out of him, I'd go on back to bed.
You become conditioned, you'll be amazed what can become the norm.
I guess I'll just have to take Stoney's word on that. But I guess it does kind of make sense if you think about it. If that's just how it was from the time you could remember, that would be the norm. Stoney was the apple of his father's eye, and Billy was Stoney's hero. He was this larger-than-life man that everyone seemed to like and respect. He helped people when they needed it and expected nothing in return. He would lay down and die for a true friend. He had a soft spot for animals and children, and he treated his family like gold. And he taught these lessons to Stoney at a very early age.
He was the best father a son ever had. He was a good husband, except for the adultery, which was the common thing back then. It was a man's world. Except for that, he was the best husband a woman could ever have. He treated my mother like a baby.
Yeah, he really just said he was a good husband, except for the adultery. And Billy did have many mistresses through the years, which clearly is something his wife, Jenny, was tolerant of. He apparently made no attempt at hiding this. He would run around the small town with different women, but he was upfront with each of them that he was married and made it crystal clear that none of them would ever take the place of his wife.
I'd never seen my father, unless he was doing business out partying, that he didn't have a beautiful woman sitting on what he called the hump. He kept a pretty little, one time it'd be a red velvet, another time purple velvet. He kept a pretty little comfortable pillow on that hump between the bucket seats. So when his hand wasn't on that 4-speed, it was on them legs. He always told me, son, a man's gonna go with pretty women, and what a woman don't know won't hurt her. But don't never take money from your home and spend on that woman. That makes you a sorry son of a bitch. And if you feel like you caught something back then, you had one thing you catch. It's called gonorrhea. They call it the clap. He said, if you think you caught something, Go by the doctor, get you a shot of penicillin and have a headache for a week or two. Don't ever take nothing home. Now, that was just as much advice as today's people tell their son, you make sure you put your seatbelt on. But he made no bones about it. He was a married man. We here to have fun, baby, and fun you'll have, but won't be no deeper.
I met a woman named Louise Jackson who can attest to the womanizing ways of Billy Birt.
Well, actually, I was Louise Blunt. I'm Jackson by marriage. And divorced and married and divorced and married and divorced and married and shacked. And Billy took a liking to me. He saw me downtown and he wanted to go out with me. I was about 13 and 14 years old. Maybe 15, 16 some of the time. I wasn't your average 13 and 14-year-old. I looked a lot older. Thank God, in older age, I look a little younger. Don't touch.
Billy Birt's reputation with women, as with most things, preceded him.
I knew who he was. I was scared to go out with him. I told him I couldn't go out with him. He said, oh, yeah, we're going out this weekend. Went home and told my mama, and she said, well, you just tell him you're not going out with him. I said, you don't understand. This is Billy Birt. You don't tell Billy Birt you're not going out with him.
Louise maintains that Billy and her had a kind of relationship for years, but that it never went further than friendship. But even with the infidelities, Stoney, at the time, thought his father was the coolest man alive. And I get it, because Billy treated him in many ways like an adult. And that's just what a young boy often wants from his father. He was just one of the guys. He felt included, respected, part of something special and secret. He was privy to things that very few people were, even his mother and siblings. Billy bought him a brand new car that he would drive to school before he was even a teenager.
9 years old, brand new Super Sport Camaro, top of the line, $396. And I'd wreck it in a month. Don't worry about it. Made to tear up. We had more money than anybody ever knew. My father didn't respect money. He made it to spend it.
He could stay up all night if he wanted to, as long as he got good grades. He gambled with gangsters and ran the pool table like a shark before even hitting puberty. He stood in the shadow of his larger-than-life father and was untouchable in his own right.
By age 8, I could do trick shots on pool tables that grown men would be amazed at, and I could just run the table. But when it come to cards, my goal was to beat my dad. I always wanted to beat my dad because I know I could do it. Because I know the basics of cards early on, and I could count numbers, and I got better and better and better. Well, by the time I was 9, I couldn't be beat by anybody my age, and most men wouldn't play me because who wants to play a kid? They couldn't take my money because my daddy wouldn't let them. But this one night, him and his boys went to sleep in there, and there's about 8 of them, and Sonny Lee was one of them. So Sonny said, you want to play some poker? And I said, yeah. Now, every night I'd rack balls, and I'd make between $100 and $300 in tips. So we started playing knot poker. We started about 3:30, 4 o'clock when everybody passed out on the pool table and benches. And at 7 o'clock, now, all through this next 2.5 hours, I was winning so much that Sonny would say, stand up for me. I'd stand up. Boy, I know you cheating. Ain't nobody wins that much. He said that. That went on all night. My daddy woke up and he looked over and he seen us intently playing. And he said, y'all been playing all night? I smiled. I said, yeah. And immediately he said, Sonny, you better not be taking that ball bunny now. He's just a kid. And Sonny, look, this is sincere. He said, Bill, this boy cheating on me. I know he is. I just ain't figured out how. And I seen my daddy, she didn't ring from her face. He said, damn, son, how much did you want off of it? He said, about $80. He called more ribbon over the next 2 years. All them boys. If he had any idea what was going to come to him in ribbon over his life, he wouldn't have said nothing.
It was there during the late 1960s that Billy Burt's Dixie Mafia really kicked into high gear. Burt was now pulling jobs at an alarming rate, sometimes 2 or 3 in a single night locally. And he would travel to Florida, the Carolinas, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, wherever he was paid to go. He might be casing a bank, burning down a building for insurance money, or carrying out a hit. It takes a small team to do this properly, and he added a few of his friends to the operation, as well as his brother, Bobby Burt, to what we'll call the inner circle of the Dixie Mafia. The boots on the ground, so to speak. The muscle.
Now, let me clarify. The Dixie Mafia, to me, was my daddy and his boys. Bobby Brown, Bobby Gaddis, Willie Hester, Charlie Reed, Sonny Lee, Bobby Burt, his brother, and when he was in a tight, his first cousin, Ralph Black, who was by no means a gangster. He just loved him dearly, and Ralph would die before he talked. Those were the boys, and Don Cooper.
Each man would get a cut of Billy's pay on any given job for their part.
And he was doing jobs from 60 on, whether it be whiskey, robbing a liquor store, so many jobs. He would use every one of them.
Don Cooper, an employee of Coca-Cola at the time, was really more of an honorary member of the group. The guys nicknamed him Booger. Billy would take him along on whiskey hauls and car races. He loved the excitement of it. Don Cooper immediately took to the Dixie Mafia lifestyle.
Riding shotgun, listening to Jerry Lee Lewis or whoever with Billy Burt and a load of whiskey, addicted Don to that life immediately. He was the last admitted to the Dixie Mafia in 1969, but he was the most loyal. But because he didn't have Humpty Dumpty's intelligence, he was stuck to doing menial jobs like casing and stuff like that. Doing these, he never got deep. But he would burn a car, he would do anything he was asked to, no problem. Don went with him one night to on a run. And because after the run there in Conyers, they was going to a nightclub, and Don rode with Daddy. Now, the party became, well, the party and the business were both exciting things. And one was about as fun as the other. You just didn't dance when you were driving something.
It didn't take long after joining Billy's gang for Don Cooper to be fired from his job under suspicion that he was involved in a recent string of robberies concerning large amounts of money from the company. In just a matter of months, Coca-Cola had been robbed of almost $160,000.
Reese Spencer's place, just after he was admitted to Dixie Mafia. This is what it done to him. I'm 10-year-old on the dance floor. Don's out there dancing with a woman. A man tries to cut in. Don said, buddy, this woman was me. Don's part of Daddy's gang, you know. So the guy tried to cut it again. Don just whoops out third day and said, shot him twice in the mouth. Damn. Wasn't uncommon for Reese's place. Reese had the bouncers grab the man, take him out, get him to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, they told him, look, here's what happened. He was outside, somebody come by, shot a distance, it was $5,000. Man took it. Everybody was on the payroll. You know that within an hour, Don and that woman was dancing on the floor again. That was just another Saturday night.
In the mid-1960s, Billy Sunday Birt and his Dixie Mafia were firing on all cylinders. In addition to the booming bootleg operation, the ever-expanding network of seedy, underworld clientele kept the money rolling in with contract arson and murder-for-hire jobs. They had also extended their services to procuring commodities like stealing gasoline by tapping into pipelines and sugar. Now, that may sound odd at first, but when President JFK signed the Cuban trade embargo in 1962, halting the import of goods from Cuba, which was one of the U.S.'s largest sugar suppliers, the cost of sugar skyrocketed across America.
In an effort to fill their larders in advance, people who never used sugar before suddenly developed insatiable cravings for the sweet food complement.
This was a problem for bootleggers because it takes a lot of sugar to make whiskey. So, the boys found a workaround.
For 20%, my father run the whiskey, handled all the operations of run the whiskey, hijacked the sugar trucks that it kept to keep it going out of 3 states, because you could not get enough sugar unless you hijacked entire tractor trailers, and it took 3 states to keep it supplied. And just handled everything about it. For that, he got 20% of all the profit.
There were other ways of getting it, too.
My name is Bob C. Brooks. Live in Monroe, Georgia. Retired banker. If I live another 2 months, I'll be 77. So I've been around a while.
Bob Brooks worked at Quality Foods Market as a stock boy when he was a teenager. A small grocery store that sold an astonishing amount of sugar.
When I was 15 years old, at Quality Food Market, I got a job after school and on Saturday, working there. They had me on Fridays, they'd bring in a tractor trailer load of sugar. We'd take it off the truck, put it in the basement of the Quality Market. And then the next day, we might have 10, 12 trucks come in and pick up 100 bags of sugar and whatever. And then by end of Saturday night, it was gone. I knew that they couldn't be selling that much sugar off the county. They had to be going somewhere.
In February of 1969, Jim Dawes, the owner of the grocery store, would go on to marry Ruth Chancey, who was the mother of Billy Burt's moonshine partner, Harold.
The only reason I knew was Dixie Mafia. Daddy owned the restaurant and the bakery across the street. And I asked him, I said, they can't sell that much sugar in Martin County. I mean, this was every week. He said, they're making liquor, son. He said, you keep your mouth shut.
It seemed at this point there weren't enough hours in the day to get all the jobs done that Burt was being hired to do. When Harold Chancey introduced him to a new business he'd ventured into sometime between 67 and 68, he needed a little convincing.
Harold Chancey had made a contact with someone, I don't know who, but I remember the day he walked in the pool room, and I remember him calling Dave behind the bar and showing him what was in his hands. I seen them, they were black. And he was telling Daddy what they would do. He'd give Daddy a few.
What Harold showed Billy were called Black Beauties, which were extremely potent and controversial bioamphetamines that were marketed as diet pills in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
That the calometric reducing formula is the only safe, sure, effective way to reduce. This package includes the Wonder 10-Day Diet that lets you eat 3 delicious meals a day, plus a bedtime snack, and even includes a jog for your willpower.
And the next thing I know, my dad had a plastic bag and he was giving them to his boys. And from then on, it took a whole new level. It was in the 6 months after that he was going to Mexico, bringing back trunk loads. This sounds crazy, but they were in double-sacked grocery bags, paper bags, the old time. And what he brought back, what I seen in his boot more than once, was those grocery bags almost full to the point that the top was folded over and taped.
By boot, he means the trunk of the car.
Once you haul a load of pills and you pay 30 cents a piece and you bring them back and sell for $1.50 a piece, and your trunk will hold 400,000, do the math. But when the pills come along, that's when he began to have a 10-day work week. It was no longer 7 days. He could go for 3 or 4 days at a time, and then he would sleep for 2 days. And that was a way of life. People like Ruth Chancey and Harold Chancey, League Eagle Striper, International Trucker out of Gainesville, who made millions hauling Black Beauties out of Mexico, and doctors all over Georgia furnishing him with amphetamine, which was Black Beauties, but legal. They were called 18875. They were black. They were what doctors prescribed, but it was called bioamphetamine, a mixture of 2 ingredients that ignited the flight or fight in you.
Black Beauties were basically legal crystal meth, but made in a lab, not in someone's basement or in a trailer out in the desert a la Breaking Bad. But they served the same purpose, You could stay awake for days at a time, be razor focused with a seemingly endless supply of energy, all without the need to even stop and eat much. The downside, they had some of the same side effects like paranoia, violence, and if you stayed awake long enough, visual and audible hallucinations. I asked Stoney if he noticed a change in his father after he started taking the pills.
Oh, yes. And yes, I did. But this is what I noticed. My dad had always been exceptional athletically. He's always been smarter than anyone. He always won every bet. He's always run every foot race. He's always won every car race. But once he started with the black pills, he became bigger than life. He became a legend to me, his own son. He done things that were impossible, like climbing the back of Casey's, like shutting down Highway 81 for 5 miles out of Winder here and racing. He just ruled the world. But here's what's funny. At about the same time, Elvis was doing the exact same thing with the exact same pills. Merle Haggard was, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee, and John Kennedy. It took the country by storm. And each one of those individuals became more than he ever could have been without it. It was nothing like crank, crack, meth, nothing similar. It was more to the tune of Adderall with a big, big boost. And you could take that every other day or through the week and sleep on weekends and lead a hourly appearance of a normal life. But it made you more of what you were. When I say the flight or fight, if you were the kind that fought and a situation arose, you was dynamite. If you were the kind that run and a situation arose, you was Speedy Gonzales.
And I'll admit, Billy Burt's pilled up feats are pretty impressive. When Stoney mentioned climbing the wall, he's referring to the building next to the pool hall that is now a restaurant called Casey's. Apparently, one night the guys were joking around at the pool hall, and Billy, who loved to be bet he couldn't do something just so he could prove you wrong, bet the guys that he could climb the corner of the building freehand, run along the roof of the building, and back down the other side in less than a minute. When Stoney first told me about this, I didn't really understand what the big deal was. So he took me there to see it for myself.
That pool room door, somewhere. Now this gate wasn't here, but here's the wall ain't changed. He climbed this wall, top, run back corner bookstore, down that wall back here under a minute. But even climbing a wall, give him 5 minutes. Hell, give him all day.
Yeah, I don't know how the hell you do that.
Now you see getting to there, but you do not see climbing that.
Yeah, I see how you can get up a couple feet here, but I mean...
It's the corner of a red brick building that's about 25 or 30 feet high. A small alley runs between Casey's and the building that used to house the pool hall. There are no obvious hand or footholds, and the sharp corners of the bricks dig into your hands when you try to grab hold. I tried, and I couldn't get higher than a few feet before dropping. I started thinking it was impossible and wanted to call bullshit on the whole thing. But it seems there were several witnesses that saw Burt accomplish this. I guess my point in telling this story is that at least twice now, Stoney has made some seemingly unbelievable claim that I had doubted, and both times I was proved wrong. The joke's on me, I guess. So, when Stoney said his dad and the boys used to regularly shut down a 5-mile section of Highway 81 heading out of Winder to race their cars, I was a bit more open-minded than I was before. Stoney and I hopped in the Torino Cobra and headed that way.
Church. It's a black church, been there since 1800s. This is always a starting point for the races, the 5 and 10 mile races this way to Ball Springs. They block off all the roads. This right here, heel. Man stand right there, drop his hand, boom, both lanes. And all the roads, crossroads be blocked for 5 or 10 miles, every what the race was. And that went on, hell, weekly. And many times when you at one of the crossroads where one of these guys with a shotgun would even stop the state patrol, whoever happened to, they'd be standing there, and when they flew by him and Harold, who was racing him, the damn cop had money bet on one of them.
It was a perfect summer day when we took our ride. We had the windows down, and the warm air felt good. So we kept driving. Stoney showed me around the area, and it seemed each few miles we drove, he would see something that would ignite an old memory. As was the case when we happened by a small, private road, and Stoney immediately slowed the car to a crawl.
Hey, you know, James Jackson, look at that, James Jackson Road. This is the Jackson farm.
Remember the man that took the family farm from young Billy Burt's mother and left them with nothing after his father died? Remember how young Billy swore that he would get back at the man? That Jackson farm.
This is where he come to kill the man.
This house here?
This house here. But now, in its day, it was a real top-of-the-line house. When he come back, the man had done died. It was 4 years when he come back, at 14. Woman come to the door. I'm sorry, sir. Jackson's still living. How about that? I'm sorry. He passed. He said, looking at her, looked like she was all hard times. And I thought about it. I said, hell, mama right. You reap what you sow. Looked like that damn money he took from it didn't do no good after all. He let it go. But I believe he done murdered that man in mind hundreds of times. From 9-year-old to 14 to come back to get him, and what kid does that?
Billy stayed busy with his obligations to the Dixie Mafia and worked hard to keep his family happy at the same time, being a good father to his children and in his own way being a good husband to Jenny. But things weren't perfect. Tension had begun to grow with another person in Billy's family.
Ray Burt was he worked hard every day of his life in heavy equipment. He did not, to my knowledge, ever steal anything. His interest in life was to be the best there ever was with his fist, not in Golden Gloves. He never had a boxing match, just in being the fastest, baddest sonbitch that ever lived because he was born with it.
Ray, the one that resembled Elvis, was the youngest of the Burt boys and was known by many as a bully. He had been most of his life. He was tough as nails, strong, good-looking, and could fight like no one else.
Ray just absolutely could not be whipped, not by normal people.
This is something I've heard many people say.
I'm 59 years old. I've been to prison twice, the roughest prisons in Georgia. I was raised in honky tonks, and I've never seen a man in my life that could even start to compare to the skill that Ray Burt had when it came to fighting. He was so fast that he hit you 3 times before you even know you were in a fight, but the first lick would total you.
Ray also liked to drink. And when he did, he had a tendency to become jealous.
Where my daddy was jealous of his women, Ray was jealous of your Cadillac. And if you thought you was a bad dude who might could whoop his butt, the only thing gonna stop him from proving that wrong would be act of God.
Hell, he enjoyed it. So much so that the Winder Recreation Parlor had almost been closed down because of all the fighting that was happening there, among other things, which concerned Billy. He couldn't have that kind of attention drawn to the place. He repeatedly told Ray he needed to chill out. Ray would apologize, then drink again a few days later, and the whole cycle would start over. He had become predictable, in a bad way. Stoney remembers being at the pool hall one night, when Ray arrived already half drunk and rowdy.
So, on this particular night, when he decided to show himself and everybody in that beer joint that he could whoop Billy Burt, the baddest damn man they thought that ever was. Pool table there, pool table there. Ray's in between the pool table and bar, which ain't but 4 foot apart. He's got a mug of beer, a frosted mug, I'll never forget it. And when he turned up to drink, they sat on the bar. When you watched the back of his hand, he looked at my dad, who was sitting from here to that 5-6 foot away. And he said, and I'm standing between them. My daddy's got he's sitting on the pool table, my father is, with a rack on his shoulder. He said, Billy, I believe I can beat you. And I thought, if it's a pool game. But when I looked at my father's face, you've heard me talk about that look, that's the first time I seen it. He looked around at Ray, And he said, "No, son, you can't." And Ray said, "I believe I can. I know I can." And my father used just like this, his two fingers, but he kept the other one on his hip. And I knew why later. He said, "Ray, it's a goddamn impossibility if you beat me." He said, "Now get the hell out of here. You ain't getting my place closed down. Hit the door." Just exactly like that. He stood there for about a few seconds, looking at him, no fear in him.
Despite being his brother, Ray Birt had just challenged the most dangerous man in Georgia.
Slowly, he walked to the door, which is 25 foot away. When he got to the door, now my father never left that table. And I never moved where I was between them. And the people who had started listening realized something was about to happen. Ray got the door and he turned around and looked, and this was about 9:30 on Saturday night. He said, "Billy, I'm leaving, but I'll be back." And he said, with his same two fingers, he said, "Ray, don't come back tonight." Ray walked out. Looked at me, he said, "Get a cab home." I said, "But Daddy, it's only 9:30. He said, "I said, get a third damn cab home." That look. I called a cab. Within 5 minutes, I was at home. 25 minutes later, Bush Chancey pulled up to the yard to tell me and my mother that Billy had just shot Ray. He got a phone call from someone, told him Ray was coming back with a gun. Ray walked in there. They half expected to have a gun, but that wasn't it. All Ray done was walk up, hit him right there in the side. Then he had his peripheral vision. He said, "It almost took me out. If he knocked me out, it'd been over." He said, but he was ready. He spun me around, and before he hit the ground, he shot Ray 3 times. Well, one of them went through Ray and parted Otis's hair. Otis kept that part till the day he died. Bush Chancey immediately pulled out a Barlow knife and laid in Ray's hands. Him did look the rest of the people in there. By this time, they dwindled down to from 30 to 10. Half of them being inside boys. So, boys, this is a story. Anybody got a problem with it, better leave now.
He was arrested and taken to the local jailhouse. But because of his reputation in the small town and the sheriff wanting no part of it, Billy was released because it was decided that he shot Ray in self-defense. The sheriff just told him to leave. He didn't even pay a fine. Billy Birt shot his brother 3 times in public, nearly killing him, and spent only 1 night in jail. Ray was in intensive care for 3 months, but he lived. When he got out of the hospital, he seemed to cool his jets a bit and lay low, at least for the time being. By the time 1970 arrived, Billy Sunday Birt and his Dixie Mafia were untouchable. It had become clear to those in the know by now that if you talked, you disappeared. There were already at least 26 people missing, and Billy Birt had no intention of slowing down. And all the while, young Stoney, who had a front row seat to the inner workings of the Dixie Mafia, was slowly being molded into his father's footsteps. Things continued to escalate, and the feds had finally decided that something must be done about Billy and his gang, because local law enforcement had proven unable or unwilling to get a handle on the situation. They had an ace up their sleeve named James Earl West, and they were about to up the ante. The members of the Dixie Mafia, whether they knew it or not, were living on borrowed time.
That is when GBI law enforcement stepped it up a notch. That's when the tables turned.
In the Red Clay is a production of Imperative Entertainment. It was created, written, and reported by me, Shaine Kipe, and I wrote and created the original music score. Executive producers are Jason Hoch and Gino Falsetto. Story editor is Jason Hoch. Produced and engineered by Shaine Freeman, Jason Hoch, and myself. Cover art and design by Jeana Sullivan. Voice sessions recorded at Tree Sound Studios, Atlanta, Georgia. Archival footage licensed courtesy of Brown Media Archives, University of Georgia, and WSB-TV in Atlanta, Georgia. In the Red Clay is a 12-episode series with new episodes available every Tuesday. Follow us on Instagram at In the Red Clay Podcast. Have questions? Email us at podcasts@imperativeentertainment.com. If you like the show, tell your friends and leave us a review. Thanks for listening.